Paranormal Karen, she's so spooky. Paranormal Karen, funny too. Paranormal Karen, she's so spooky. Oh, and did I mention she's funny too? Yeah, cha-cha-cha.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Paranormal Karen. I'll get my show business out of the way real quick. If you could leave me 5 stars wherever you listen, that would be great. On August 20th, or September 6th, which I believe this is coming out. If you're in Lancaster, come see me at the Lancaster Comedy Competition and Festival. September 21st at 5 p.m. You can see me at the Melrose Improv at Women of a Certain Age. That is a great show. And October 17th, you can see me all weekend at the Ann Arbor Comedy Club. And now let's get right to it. So folks, I don't know if you know, but when I find a guest, this is what I do. I find someone, I cyber stalk them, and then it's a series of about 7,000 or 8,000 text messages back and forth, give or take 2 or 3. And today's guest is so super interesting. He's in England, so it took even more going back and forth. He is an author. He writes, should I say horror slasher trilogy?
Yeah, horror thriller will work.
Okay, and he has a fantastic YouTube channel that you're going to love where he reviews movies, and he's so in the horror field, talks to directors and stuff. And here's the best part. He's a minister, which then I know everything just changed, didn't it, folks? Peter Laws, welcome to the show. How are you there in England?
Hey, Karen, it's good to be here. I'm great. It's actually 6 p.m. on a Friday night where I am, so I'm sitting here chilling. I've got a beer next to me.
Oh, I'm
relaxed.
Well, then I'm sitting here starting breakfast with vegan cookies because I usually go to yoga at this time, and I was like, no, I got to get this guy at this time. So, where to even begin, Peter? What kind of a minister are you? That sounds so.
I've had that said to me so many times, but with a more aggressive tone.
No, I love it.
I'm technically a Baptist in Britain, but don't be alarmed because the term Baptist, particularly in America, is a very loaded word, and it can make people think of Fred Phelps, that family who are kind of pick at gay people's funerals, God hates fags and all that stuff. Or indeed, they can think of the Southern Baptist Convention, which are notoriously kind of, they can be kind of anti-women in leadership and all that sort of stuff. Just because I've got the word Baptist, that doesn't mean I share the same ideas as them. I'm from the Baptist Union in Britain. We've been ordaining women for like 100 years now. So yeah, it's quite different.
And I think it should say that on your business card, Baptist minister, don't be alarmed.
Yes. Yeah, I have to say that so much to people because they hear Christian and they start like sort of slowly backing away. But then if they hear the Baptist, it's got bad PR.
It's funny because I just had a guest on that introduced me to Gnosticism, which is just there's so much, and you're right. And I kind of, as an American, I apologize. I think we've given Christian. There's a certain type of Christian that has come up very aggressive. And it sort of left a cloud there. But no, I would say that sounds great. In fact, if you're ordaining women, I might be looking for a job soon. So I'll be there.
Yeah, come on down.
So how were you always, let's mix the two now. Were you always a fan of horror or because everybody's wondering, how do these two go together?
Oh, I was a fan of horror like way before I ever even set foot in a church. I only started becoming interested in Christianity, particularly in my early 20s. Up until that point, I was really, really against organized religion and specifically Christianity. I used to think just Christians. I met a few Christians at school and they creeped me out. They looked like they were going to try and turn me into you can remember the Stepford Wives, the film and the book by Ira Levin. That film really resonated with me when I was a teenager because I was very much like, I am my own person and I don't want to be molded into some sort of banal version of myself. And I just met Christians.
You don't want a wife
that's
like
what
that.
You want to do.
Yeah, you don't want a wife.
Sorry, say again?
You don't want a wife that's a Stedford wife either. That looks awful to me. I mean, I'm not a man.
I mean,
but
they have nice hats. Let's be fair; they've got nice big floppy hats. But apart from that, they're just hollowed out shells. I didn't want to be that, so I was very against Christianity. I was in a band for a while called Creatures of the Night, and we used to. I wrote a song I remember called Diabolo about spitting on the Bible and how God was a loser and all the classic sort of garage band stuff. But then, anyway, in my early 20s, I started asking a few big questions. But what was interesting was that it was horror films that kind of got me on a journey to thinking about, is there something more to life than just pure flesh and blood and pure rationalism? I think horror films can be really irrational in the sense that they have monsters and ghosts and all these sorts of crazy things that press into our lives. And that just intrigued me. But I'd never thought that Christianity was the place to find it until my early 20s.
And that's what I always think the paranormal world, whether you're coming to it from a positive or sort of a scary place, which I'm not going to call negative, but like a curiosity, it really does show you that there's more.
Yeah, it does. And I think that's one of the attractions from it. Even if, I mean, I've got, plenty of my atheist friends are still fascinated with the paranormal, and you don't have to have a sort of a belief that this stuff is absolutely real to be interested in, because it's so quirky and weird and cool. But what I like about horror and what I like about the paranormal is it just injects kind of a level of epicness into our everyday lives. I can watch a film or read a book in which amazing things are happening to people on the other side of the world, let's say in like thrillers or whatever, or in dramas or sitcoms. But I feel like a horror film or the paranormal can say, hey, guess what? You could have that happen in your own house. You could have, there's a spooky house on the end of the street that could be haunted by an old lady or something who's dead. And that just instantly turns up the color, I think, on your life. For some people, it makes them scared. To me, it just makes life more interesting.
And you know what, too? That's what a great phrase. It turns up the color. And also, when you do have, what I find is having faith does make those things not as terrifying, but more, kind of, like you said, turn up the color. And I want to get into that topic of fear, kind of where, to me, it leads back to authenticities. But when you got your calling, it really was just from curiosity, and you were like, hey, I'm on board.
Yeah.
This is an odd offshoot, but I'm always very fascinated, especially as a comedian, by Ricky Gervais, who I love his comedy. He's like an atheist, sort of an aggressive atheist, I think I would put it. And yet he puts out these movies that are totally of my thinking. Have you any opinion, or it baffles me too when I hear him sort of, because I read tarot cards, which I'm sure is not part of your Baptist ministry, but
well, I'm not actually the type of, I am a kind of, you could call me a dodgy but Christian, in the sense that I'm really quite open-minded. So, I mean, when it comes to things like tarot cards, for example, I remember when I was training at Bible college, and some guy brought in some tarot cards to discuss some of the Christian symbolism, which is on the cards. And I'd never heard this before. So he passed them around, and everyone in that lecture hall just wouldn't touch them because they felt that they had this kind of scary power. Whereas I was like, come on, it's an interesting way of exploring life. Let's have a look at them. So yeah, for me, I'm very reticent to put barriers around people's expressions of, I don't know, to sound too much like the cosmic. We're all on this kind of journey together, trying to figure things out. And so, like, for example, when you mention Ricky Gervais, may well be an atheist, but he explores themes and ideas which touch on some, very profound kind of eternal ideas sometimes. And to me, that I don't have a problem with that, because I don't think, the religious people have the floor when it comes to spiritual matters, and atheists don't. To me, it's all kind of mixed up, and I want to learn from everybody.
I think you just got 100 people on board for your church. And first of all, thank you, thank you for that definition of tarot, because people, like, I am sort of a tarot historian. I'm getting ready to teach a class,
Yeah.
and two things people do not understand: the rider deck was created in Christ's consciousness, and also they're paper. They're not magical. They're not,
exactly.
They're not haunted. They're a piece of paper. That's what I was taught.
Yeah, completely. And I think, in a way, I was looking at some of my kind of fellow trainee ministers thinking like, wow, you're reading evil into things that are completely benign. This is not something that's going to suddenly like run up your arm and sort of plant something devilish in you. Just chill out. And I find that I've found that as I've grown older, I've become, I suppose part of it is because I'm a Christian who also leaves room for doubt. So I'm quite willing to believe that then God may not exist. That doesn't freak me out. That's just a natural part of any worldview. I think most people, when they think about it, if they're thinking people, should leave a bit of room for doubt.
Yeah.
With whatever thing. And so, yeah, it could well be that there is no such thing as the paranormal, the supernatural, or the divine, or the religious. And so I think that's why sometimes if I'm kind of in a scenario which feels like it could have some sort of paranormal thing, there's always in my mind thinking, well, this is scary, but nothing might happen. Because I also have a bit of cynicism too.
Right.
Then it becomes kind of boring.
And what if it was just a great, if it's not there, what a great trip of imagination I had. And
yeah, well, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I just went to Disney. I went to Disney World with my family over Easter. I was having an absolute blast, going around, hanging out with Goofy and all those guys. But I don't have to believe they're like real talking animals for me to get a kick out of them. I make a connection with the themes and with the ideas. They stir something deep in me. So it makes sense to me why an atheist could also be interested in the paranormal, or indeed even religion. Be interested in religion without feeling they have to plug into it.
You've already expanded my mind, and we're like 10 minutes in. And I always feel like too, there's it's very odd because I'm all in metaphysical, but when someone doesn't want to touch tarot cards, I always feel like that's your superstition, and I'm not superstitious. Yeah. And I was very lucky. I was brought up Methodist, and it was this very like, hey, do the best you can, and we'll see you next week. It was very, very good. Okay, so let's jump right into this. I always feel like I always had a friend, and she was like, I couldn't watch these movies. Why do you like to be scared, or whatever this brings up in you? And I was always two things, which is I don't think it scares me later. Although now that I've been doing paranormal investigation, images do scare me because I have seen some stuff I can't unsee.
Okay,
but I also feel like I feel very in the moment when I see a movie that makes me jump or something. What is your feelings on this?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think what happens is some people will get excited by physical thrills, like throwing themselves off a building in a bungee jump scenario. I find that a bit like threatening, a bit scary to do. I do have logic in my brain too, and I worry about potentially dying. But I'm totally into the psychological thrill, or the psychological roller coaster. And for me, horror provides that, and has done since I was a little boy. And so there are many reasons why I'm drawn to the morbid and macabre, and always have been, and indeed was drawn to it way before I set foot in a church. Some of the reasons I would say, and I talk about these things in my book, The Frighteners, which explores why people like the morbid. There's loads of actually quite rational reasons why a society would. Number one, our brains really desire information. We want to know, particularly information that might help us survive, be that from an evolutionary perspective or whatever. But we want to know how to continue and not die. And so for us to drive on the motorway and spot a car crash, it's actually absurd to think that we wouldn't want to look at that. Some people feel guilty to do that. They think there's something wrong with them. But actually your brain is just going, oh my goodness, that guy just crashed and he looks like he's dead. It's terrifying, but I need information so that I can avoid a similar fate. And so to look away is to be ignorant, and to look away and be ignorant is to risk yourself crashing later. So it's natural to look at these things. I think one of the reasons I look at horror films quite a lot and write scary novels with death in them is also because death is so inevitable. I'm pretty disturbed by it. Like I'm pretty scared. But seriously, Karen, right? I've hung out with Christians enough now to like I've met little old ladies who like read the Bible. They read the Book of Revelation as if it's kind of a travel brochure that's going to tell them where they're going, when they die, to meet all their loved ones. But I'm like, look, I'm not that old. I'm kind of middle aged, I guess. I'm 44, and I'm thinking, oh my word, I'm not ready to die yet. I find death scary. And I need ways to come to terms with that.
Interesting.
And I'm not the type of person who turns away. And so I explore death in detail, but in ways that I can handle. And that's through like writing and watching. Those sorts of things it's a way of taking like the chaos of real fear is not enjoyable. So some of your listeners here, I mean, they would have been through situations which are not fun, scary,
traumatic,
and they know what it's like to experience that. So I think what we do is we try and learn courage by taking that which is scary and consuming them in predictable formats from genre movies. I think this it's precedent. I mean, you can see this in studies of children who deal with post-traumatic stress, like the children of who had families who died in the Twin Towers, for example. They would build Lego towers and Lego planes and smash them into one another, and people would look at this and think, what is wrong with these kids? They're belittling a serious event. And this child psychologists were like, no, they're not. They're taking the things that terrified them and were chaotic, and they're trying to put them in organized forms as a way of come to terms.
Wow, what a great way to put that. And I also feel like there is something about and I'm getting very deep, probably in a Nightmare on Elm Street kind of thing, but
yeah.
But you are in a really good horror movie. You are really rooting for that person. You're watching that person take everything in them to get away from the unknown or something like that. And you guys in England, I have to say, we Americans, we need a happy ending. We don't care what it is. Turn it around, make it a happy ending. We're mad if we leave the theater, but you guys in England keep it real.
Yes. And I quite like I like films sometimes that have that unresolved ending. I love films particularly that leave the door open to both a supernatural and a natural explanation. That's certainly what I do in my novels. I want people to be able to read them both ways. I think a great film that does this is The Omen. The Omen being kind of like it was once described, I think, as the Exorcist for Protestants, which it kind of is a bit. But The Omen's great because you watch that film and you think, with all that Jerry Goldsmith score, you think, crap, like this film is full on believing in the Antichrist. You watch it back there with a purely rational mindset and you think, you know what, this could have just been a series of really chaotic random events that everyone has completely misread, to the point of view where a dad is going to murder his own son. Right. And that, to me, that middle ground's really interesting, where it could be either.
That's like, I can't think of a movie offhand, but a movie where it's the whole thing and then the person wakes up in an insane asylum and you go, well, did it happen? Or was that in their thing?
Yeah.
Oh my God. So, and on the other side of the break, I want to get to near-death experiences, but, yes, I had one more thought and then it escaped me. I'm already too fascinated. All right, folks, we're going to take the break and I'll be right back. Who do tarot readers go for tarot readings? They go to Melissa Sonova at melissasonova.com. She gave me the best reading a couple of months ago that is still resonating and helping me out now. She is authentic and to the point. You loved her on the podcast. She is the no BS tarot reader. She also has a tarot class online right now. Check it out. Just watching the promo, you will see how much fun you are going to have while you learn. Also, check check out her book, which is always right beside me when I'm doing my readings or my tarot card for me in the morning. It is called Kitchen Table Tarot, and you will love it. Melissa Cynova, that's Melissa Check her out. Okay, so back to death. I always think, it is funny how obsessed people are with the end of the world. And I don't know if that is like, hey, we're in this together, or it makes them think they don't have to have a savings account. They can run up their credit card, whatever it is. People are obsessed with it. But I always found peace in listening to near-death experiences. You must read about those.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not an expert on it, but I've certainly, read a bit about them, and I've met people who have said they've had those sorts of things, and they're very fascinating.
They are. I remember one that someone had a negative one. I heard this guy. Oh, the dog's upset by this conversation. I have dogs in planes going
it's
by.
It's important.
I know, and I don't edit them out, but people on my podcast are used to it. She said this woman had a near-death experience, and she said she floated into what seemed to be what was hell, to her, where people were being tortured, and it was the whole Dante's Inferno. Da 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 da.
Oh, okay.
And she said the most interesting thing was everyone was so into their pain that no one looked up to realize they could walk out at any time. And
okay.
I know. Is that interesting? Like the self.
Do you mean they were into their pain as in like they were getting a kick out of it, or just they were
like it was self-punishment? Like I'm not worthy, so
Oh, I see. I thought you meant they were being like prodded by pitchforks and they were saying, "Hey, this is pretty cool. I'm into this."
No, but I know those people too. They're more dangerous. But it was like there was one of my favorite movies, and this is how this is a little bit of my psychology. Is my favorite? Yeah. I don't like romantic movies. I only like Ghost and What Dreams May Come. And in both those movies, the men are dead. So that's a little psychological thing about me. But a little fear of intimacy there. But what Dreams May Come, do you remember that film?
Yeah.
To me, it was sort of a note about suicide and about this woman that would not stop punishing herself for, she felt like she was responsible, that everybody in her family died when she wasn't. And, it was, I just thought it was beautiful.
Yeah, I mean it is beautiful, but also that film has some really great imagery of hell. But it's worth remembering, and sometimes Christians I think don't realize this, is that the idea of hell, the images of hell, the furniture of hell that they have in their mind is not really sourced from the Bible itself. It's more from kind of like medieval art and the work of Dante and stuff like that. And so these sort of stereotypical images of fire and pitchforks and people, buried underground, put their heads in the ground and stuff. It doesn't necessarily mean that if hell was to exist, it would look like that. And actually, I mean, there's quite a lot of people in the Christian community, growing numbers, who would argue that hell, if it indeed exists, would be very sparsely populated, if not empty.
Wow.
And the reason they would suggest that would be to look at the idea of God's character as revealed in the Bible, particularly through Jesus. So the guy is all about forgiveness. He's about constant forgiveness. Now, imagine if, I don't know, like a 3-year-old is mowed down by a truck or something, or a severely mentally handicapped person when they're 16 or 25 is killed in terrible circumstances. And someone was to come along and say, well, you know what? I think if God existed, he would be reasonable. I use this word "he," by the way.
Sure, I do.
Throwaway line, but it's beyond all of that. But no, God would be reasonable character. I think he would take into account that the 3-year-old wasn't fully aware of that they couldn't intellectually give assent to the Bible, let's say, or maybe the severely mentally ill, mentally handicapped person couldn't, and therefore God would be lenient. And give them an opportunity to respond to God if they wanted to, after having a full revelation of who he is. And the argument would be, well, look, do we really think everyone has had like a full revelation of who God is, if indeed he exists? Sometimes people tend to think, oh, well, look, my friend, as if a Christian, I've heard Christians say this, well, I invited my friend to the carol service at church, and we told them the gospel, and they weren't interested, and they left, and therefore they've rejected God. And so I suppose if they don't sort that out, they're going to go to hell. That paints a picture of a very strange God that isn't reflective of Jesus, who would want people to have a full opportunity to respond. And so some people would say, actually, it's everyone will get an opportunity to say yes to God. Theoretically, if you don't want to hang out with them in eternity, then yeah, hell should exist. But the argument is most people wouldn't opt for that.
That is, I think, where it gets. Because I was never about organized religion, and I guess, I use that term, but sometimes people hate spiritual, but I think when you get into those rules, and I do think God understands, we're not perfect, and when you get into those rules, or that person hasn't been baptized, or whatever, I think that's where people stray away. I have a friend that is so, he was brought up Catholic, very strict Catholic, and he's so consumed with guilt. And I always say to him, so you got that part, but you don't remember the forgiveness part. The part that stayed with you was the guilt and not the forgiveness.
Exactly.
Exactly.
And that is very topsy-turvy when you see Jesus, who's supposed to be this full revelation of who God is. And to turn that into basically, like when Jesus was around, he was criticizing who? The Pharisees. He constantly was criticizing them. And why was he criticizing them? Because they were putting like frameworks in place that if you have to tick all of these boxes, and if you follow these rules, you're in. And those are the people that Jesus got annoyed with. And he kept telling parables about the unlikely people actually are going to be in paradise.
And it's interesting because I always am a little bit torn on, like, I understand, you or even a monk or somebody that has dedicated their life to God and ministry and stuff like that. And, I had a friend, and he was a comedian, and he was perhaps, immoral, sleeping with everyone, but not in a good way, cheating, drugs, alcohol. Yeah. And I'll never forget, he had a near-death experience, and this taught me so much. He said, I looked down, I was sitting on a cloud, I looked down on my body, and I was choking on a donut I ate after I was drunk or something. He was just like it was the most, like,
what a way to go.
Yes, aggressive. And where I hear other near-death experiences where people go, I wish I had, I should have, he said, all I remember was looking at God and saying, I had the best time. And I thought, wow, maybe some of us are here to not to hurt others, but to have the best time, Yeah,
I in some ways, because I think like the message of Christianity is probably self-evident within most people, because most people are sensible, and I include my atheist friends, I include my Satanist friends in this, that actually when you drill down to it, we have a very, very similar shared morality. Like I was chatting with a Satanist a little while ago in London. We were having a coffee together.
Say that again. I was chatting with
a Satanist. I know. We were having a coffee in London, and he was on about how Satanism was a way of him sort of breaking away and being liberated from the shackles of Christianity. And I was like, oh, okay. And then we started talking about sexuality, for example. I'm very liberal when it comes to that sort of subject. I don't think the Bible is very clear at all. Not like people seem to think about sexuality. So I think it's fine to be gay, et cetera, et cetera. But anyway, so I was trying to drill down, well, so what is the big liberation for you? And I was like, so is it anything goes with sexuality? And it was like, well, yeah. And I said, okay, so does that mean it's like, is it okay for you to be a pedophile or to rape? And he was like, oh, no, clearly not, because that crosses his sexual ethic.
Right.
And I was like, aha, so we do share the same basic, I think, moral ethic. And I think, and you see this consistently in human beings. We can tell that it is wrong to exploit people. and that it is wrong to use people. And we can also tell when it is right to honor people and love them. And that, to me, is across the board. I see that not just in Christians. In fact, I often don't see it in Christians.
Yeah.
Ironically.
Yeah. Consent.
Some people...
Consent is all you need.
Yeah, that sounds like a song. But I just feel like this thread of morality to me is actually that became another reason why I started considering the idea of a creator or some sort of divine influence in the world. It didn't make me think, oh, therefore everyone's just nice. It made me think, why are we always so altruistic? Like, why are so many people erring on the side of goodness? Is it just tribal kind of self-replication and protection, maybe evolutionary perspective, maybe, or is there a kind of organizing principle behind evolution, which I find interesting? Anyway, wow, we're getting to some really deep subjects here, Karen.
We haven't even gotten to your books or your YouTube channel, which I promise we're going to get to. You know what's evolution in? I think that started on HBO, which is not just about movies, but in where humanity is going. Because I always say it's authenticity. That's what I want. I laugh that I kind of walk amongst the light workers, but I say I once saw a light worker drop kick a meter maid, and that's more authentic to me. You know what I mean? Like, okay, you're real. Don't tell me you're all, love and light. Be real.
That's right. Yeah.
Have you been watching The Handmaid's Tale?
No, I haven't. We've got my wife and I are planning on doing it. God. You work through box sets, but it's supposed to be amazing.
It is amazing. In fact, it's the only show I can't sleep after because it's white knuckle the whole way, and it's so good. So I'll go to Sopranos. Say they're starting to be where movies used to be very black and white, good and bad. Love versus hate, good versus evil, and then you watch starting The Sopranos is the first time I noticed we embraced the whole person. This is a mob boss that does bad things, that is also depressed and loves this person. And you see that. Wait till you see how your emotions are going to be twisted in Handmaid's Tale. It is so brilliant. And also, something I noticed about you like threes. So I'm a little numerology person. You do things in threes. You have your trilogy, and now your Frighteners book. That's one book in three different versions, correct?
Yeah, it is. I hadn't actually realized that, but yeah.
Well, on your website, you have three different covers, and I was because I'm a very numerology person, and I thought it was funny. I go, I see threes everywhere with him, and that's Father, Son, Holy Ghost. So,
well, there you go.
Yeah, and just I really do. It is, I don't know how to say this, but it's such a compliment and great to see. I really feel like you are walking in Jesus' steps. In other words, I am talking to these people and I'm not judging that person. And that's just.
Yeah, I think that might be because I was half of my life, I was so suspicious of Christians because I just felt all they were interested in was some sort of kind of spiritual scalp. It was like, aha, I shall claim thee, and go on to the next person. And I just thought that doesn't seem like a very loving thing to do. And so for me, when it comes to my faith, I actually, Karen, sometimes can be overly cautious about it because I'm so paranoid that people are going to think that I'm just wanting to convert them, or that I'm a certain type of person, that I'm always kind of apologizing or trying to kind of pack it in. Hey, I'm not trying to convert you here. And I think most people, after a while, to get to know me, they realize that I'm not interested in. Like some people have said to me, "Do you write horror novels because you're trying? It's a technique to swing into an area of culture and scoop up the lost and bring them back to us." And it's like, no,
it's so
because I love horror stuff. I just love it, and it matters to me. It's meaningful to me, and it always has been. And I find I'm just meeting more and more people, Christians or non-Christians or whatever, who they just find great meaning in the paranormal and in horror and things like that. I think that's indicative of a society that has kind of lost track with, institutions, never mind, religious institutions, but politics or whatever. And so, a religious institution that says, yes, life could be cosmic, come with us. We're like, yeah, we're not so sure about that.
Yeah.
And then, but then horror is the only genre in a way that comes back and says, hey, what happens if there is something after death after all? What happens if there is an idea of objective good and evil? It's why I think horror will always be with us. I'm glad about that.
Right.
Because it touches on such deep topics.
Yeah. And okay, so let's get right to the frighteners. So it's a little bit about what we were talking about, why we love monsters, ghosts, death, and gore. Tell us a little bit about that. And folks, it's everywhere, right? I see you're even getting it in German, correct? It's being translated?
Yeah, well, actually, my novels are translated in German.
Okay.
It's been translated in Taiwanese, I think, at the moment. It's coming out in China or something, and it's out in America in hardback. And that was such a blast to write that book. I mean, I normally write fiction, but I wrote this book because so many people kept asking me, why do you like horror, especially because you're a Christian, or especially because you're a minister? And I wanted to answer that question, but I also wanted to explore it on behalf of the millions of people who do. And so it's a pop psychology, part travelogue, memoir of me traveling in Transylvania and in Rome and in Britain, meeting people who believe they're vampires, hunting for werewolves, going on ghost hunts, holding locks of Charles Manson's hair in my hand, trying to understand why people are drawn to the macabre. And it's trying to defend that. It's trying to say this is a part of us as humans, and I think we need it. I think the very presence of it, the consistent presence of it, should tell us something, that we need this, particularly in societies where visible death has disappeared so much. There was a time when your granny died, you might sit her up and take a photograph of her and put that photograph on your mantelpiece, because photography used to be very expensive back then, and you couldn't take a lot of pictures. But when they were dead, you thought, quick, I better take a picture of her corpse. So I can remember that used to be normal, the memento mori of the Victorians. But then, gradually bodies started disappearing from general life. And that was good reasons. We started to learn more about infection and things like that. But as a result, actual death is not a common sight for most of us. Most of us don't experience it. And so there's a journalist, I can't remember her name offhand, but she phrases it this way. She says, you see the sort of the vanishing of death, as it were, but you see the ascent of its image. Wow. And so we start to bring the image of death back. And I think that's one of the reasons why zombies are so big and so popular, because it's literally saying we want our dead bodies back, but we want them in a way we can handle. But we want them in a way. Sorry, go on.
I always say I can't get into the zombies because I think they would smell. And I don't think you would be surprised. I know that I probably just took the wind out of everybody's zombies, but I always think, well, they would smell if you can't smell them. What's going on there that you can't smell them?
Oh, my word. I didn't even think of that. Do you have long hair? I do. Man, you got to get that cut as soon as the zombie apocalypse starts. Because if you're running, that's it's so easy to just grab and yank you back. So that's the first thing you got to do, Karen, when it starts.
And that's why that woman that keeps surviving in that show, Walking Dead, she has the short hair. She's ahead of all of us.
Yeah, that's the secret.
Good point.
Yeah, that's the secret.
There's a Twitter, a couple of my friends of mine, they have I can't get a hold of them to get them on the podcast, but they have a Twitter account called, and a website called Order of the Good Death. And they do all things about death, including some real important work where certain states are trying to make it illegal to have your wake in your house, which is for poor people. They can't afford all that. And it was just an easy way. And so they do some really good work. So you might find them interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that sort of stuff is important because what has happened is because death has vanished from our society, it's become taboo. And it's astonishing when you read some of the statistics of for example, parents who have just simply not even thought about organizing alternative care for their children if they were to die. And you see some of the stats of why people refuse to do that, and they think it's like superstitious thinking. They think, well, hang on, if we talk about that, it will make it happen,
right?
And so they just leave it. Lots of people idealize their own death, and so they have this kind of deathbed scene that's been fueled by, films where we're going to be in a bed and everyone's going to be around us and, we'll say goodbye. And sadly, not all deaths are like that. In fact, a lot of people die in scenarios which are not ideal.
Yes.
You can put it that way. And it's actually what I find with horror, and I find this particularly with when I think about real death. In the book, I go backstage at a funeral home and see what they do with the corpses. It's a bit intense, but when I went home that day, I was just flinging my arms around my wife, and I was just like, oh my goodness, like life is so amazing. And you find this with people who have been given diagnosis, like you've got 6 months to live or something, and they suddenly start noticing real life. Whereas when you think you can live forever, you don't.
I have a friend that is, she's very ill. I actually, I'm pretty sure she's going to make it, but she's, doing paperwork and stuff. And she, people don't know there's places, and someday, folks, I'll get this and I'll find it for you because I'm going to sign up right away, where you can have your body cremated, no cost, and they put the ashes in a tree, or they make it so that you become, you know what I mean? I don't know how it works, but you are literally replenishing the earth, and it's free. So,
wow.
Yeah, there's
also a company. There's a company called Ann Vinely. And you can get your ashes pressed into a vinyl record. Oh, if you're, if for all the hipsters out there, and literally you can like choose your favorite songs, or they can come to your house and they'll record you with some kind of goodbye messages or tell a few jokes or whatever. And they put the record on, and every time you hear a little, that's like Granddad's eyelid.
Except then you got to be careful you're not sold at a yard sale years later.
Yeah, that's right. I'll give it to a DJ to mix it, maybe.
Oh, that's so funny. And, I always I'm kind of working on a new joke, and I always laugh because I do hot yoga every day, and there's a woman that comes in with an oxygen tank, and I pull my mat right up next to her because I am determined not to die in my sleep. It's going to be exciting, and it's going to be big. And folks, we will be right back. We got so much to talk about. Psychic medium and buddy of mine, Terry Huberman, is with me today. Terry, you've given me so many great readings and healings, and now you've got everything together in one package. Tell me about that.
I sure do. So this package has energy healings, readings, and coaching.
Coaching, that's the best. And people, they buy the package. You give them coaching once a week?
Yeah, so we meet online once a week, and in between, there's support as well.
And who would this be for?
This is really for folks who are in indecision, needing to get into their intuition because they're blocked or stuck. They need to move forward. And so we explore what the root causes of the problems are.
And helps them get out of their own way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Terrific. And what can they expect from this?
Sure. So moving from anxiousness to confidence, accessing their freedom, joy, and security, and really being in alignment with themselves so they have that clear direction, so they know, aha, this is what I need to do next to reach my goals.
So now there's something that's free so people can talk to you and see if this is for them.
Yeah, absolutely. On my website, terryhuberman.com, there is a page where you can click, and it's the intuitive coaching package. And there is a button there that says schedule a free call. So you go ahead, schedule it. We'll get on a call, and you can learn more about this program, and we'll see if this is a good fit for you or not.
See if there's chemistry.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
It's an odd date.
TerryHuberman.com, TerryHuberman. I highly recommend it, folks. We're back. We got to squeeze all this in. Oh my God. So you also write for, here's your journalism part, for 14 times. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, that's right. The 14 times. Yeah.
14 times. Okay. I pronounce everything wrong. My listeners are used to it. I say turmeric and everyone's head explodes. So there's an article here, and I just see the front of it. I couldn't get to it, but it's possessed by demons, a fear we all have. That's probably the biggest fear, isn't it?
Well, to be honest, not quite for me. I remember I wrote that article. That was an article for a national newspaper in the UK, and they put that headline on there. And I remember thinking, like, why did you put that headline on?
Oh, that's not what I said.
It said something like, it said something. Yeah, I didn't say that, and I was like, I don't actually know that many people who their biggest fear is being possessed by a demon. Most people don't even think that. It's like, falling out of a plane maybe. And also that newspaper they originally put it out as from Britain's leading exorcist. I'm like, whoa, hang on. I'm not even an exorcist. But no, that was part of me discussing demonic possession, because I was asked to speak at a film premiere on the topic of demonic possession, because the film was about possession. What's really interesting about that, and actually, this is going to spoil your 3 theory, by the way, okay. But I'm just working on the fourth novel in the series, and that comes out next year.
Well, you're numerologically evolving. That's what you can say.
Yeah. Mind you, when that book comes out, I'll probably just die of a heart attack.
You'll have to have 2 more. You got to make it a 6 and cut in half.
Oh yeah, I better get writing. But anyway, that 4th novel is called Possessed, and it explores in fictional form, but it explores a very real thing that's happening at the moment, and that is a growth in demand for the ritual of exorcism. More and more people today are asking to be exorcised. They're going to churches or to independent exorcists and deliverance ministers and saying, I have a demon, or my husband has a demon, get rid of it. And this novel explores the reasons why that is. The novel's, by the way, the lead character is an atheist, and so his explanation is, it's a psychological reason, not spiritual.
Wow.
But the growth is real.
And also here they are. The 3 novels are Purged. That's the first one, correct?
Yeah.
Sanctified, Purified, and Purged. The second one, Unleashed, all by Peter Laws, and that is as easy as it is to spell Laws. And the third one is Severed. Oh dear. Severed. And I have one of my best friends, in fact, the guy that stays at my apartment when I'm away, because he works in LA and has a house in Washington. He's a demonologist, and it's very misunderstood. I cannot tell you, I don't know what people think that is, or and he's been on the show several times, and I know sometimes I hear on radio shows there's a guy that's like, everybody should be exercising, and if you throw out the devil, and I have a 16-year-old that does it, and we both go, He is so unbelievably educated in everything from dead languages to myths and different ethnic backgrounds. And he's also the most positive guy you will ever meet, because it's not about, he's always about keeping his vibration higher. And he's very careful. So not to sort of throw off this, but you, too many people doing it. Is it I believe it does happen, and I've only had one incident, which I don't even talk about, but is it something is that then just an excuse for people's bad behavior sometimes?
I think it can be, but I think it's more complicated than just saying it's an excuse, because it could be, sound like somebody is consciously choosing. And
it's a judgment. That was a very judgmental statement. Yeah.
Yeah. But, I don't think there's that many people who say, hey, I know I grabbed the psychologist in the nuts, but, it was Pazuzu, not me. I don't think there's that many people who think of it so blatantly. But I do think possession and exorcism, and I think it's a very dangerous topic, by the way, because it's to misdiagnose people who've got mental health issues, who desperately need medication or should go to their doctors, and then label them as a demon. That's dangerous. So it's a very serious topic. But it does make sense to me that the numbers are growing, because I think we're living in a world today where the stigma around mental health labels is so great.
Yeah.
That when people get a mental health diagnosis, they cannot help, particularly because of a society that is like a blame culture. They can't help but turn the blame on themselves. And so they're thinking, oh my goodness, there's something wrong with me, or there's something wrong with the architecture of my brain or the chemicals on my brain. It's me, I'm the problem. That is not a very pleasant place to be, to feel that there's something wrong with you. People don't often think that when they break their legs, because it's only like an external problem, but they might think it with mental health. And subsequently what happens is somebody comes along with an alternative explanation. They say, no, the problem is not you. It is a foreign invader that has stepped into your head, your body, for a limited period of time. So the way you're acting has nothing to do with you. You're completely normal, but this foreign invader can be kicked out with this ancient ritual called exorcism. for some people, if they've got a religious background particularly, that actually can be a slightly more attractive idea than having a label that could stay with them for the rest of their lives. And so they can, they'll go for the sort of the blame, if you will. No, there is no blame, of course. You know, if someone breaks their leg or whatever, there's no blame. It's just that these things happen. People get mental health issues. It just happens. You don't blame anyone, but people sadly do. And some people find it easier to blame a demon.
Right. Interesting. And this could be a loaded question, but when you have like a Charles Manson, who obviously his childhood was just a horror movie from the get-go. Do you think there is a difference between somebody who is maybe, is there no redemption for a guy like him?
I think there's a redemption for everybody? So, including the devil.
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah.
Like what I mean is, like, potentially, because if we have a God that understands, like in the book, I write a chapter called Killer Culture, which explores the murderabilia industry, and that's people who will buy items or souvenirs related to the world's most savage killers. I know where you can buy a half-eaten burrito by Charles Manson for about $700. Right?
Wow.
So people are into this stuff, and I found that chapter definitely the hardest to write, because I love horror movies, but to learn about real killers, you know, Ted Bundy or whatever, I find them so abhorrent.
Right.
And the hero worship of these people really creeps me out, particularly Ted Bundy, who kind of raped and mutilated children. And people seem to kind of forget that.
And those families are still alive. The families of those people are still alive.
Oh, yeah, they are. And in the book, I interview a guy in Texas who was trying to shut down the murderabilia industry, and he was telling me that he serves on the board for parents of murdered children. And I was like, crikey, I didn't even know there was a group called that, but there's a group for if your child's been murdered, you can join this group. And he was saying they often will have Google alerts, these parents, Google alerts for the names of their killers, and so they will find out, you know, every day if they're mentioned, and they're maybe hoping to find information maybe about the case, but often it's people who are like, they've made a T-shirt which says, you know, Ted Bundy for president, or Ted Bundy is cool, and it's shocking. But anyway, so these people, I can naturally just be disgusted with serial killers. And I remember watching for the book, I was watching some documentaries about them, and I was just like so abhorred by what they did. However, but then you go into the deep, like you say, their past and maybe the architecture of their brain and things like that changed them. And it just becomes, I'm not keen on just labeling someone completely evil, because you just don't know. Right. The acts are evil, but you just don't know what people are capable of when they're forced through certain hoops. And you know, if you're a psychopath, you're not even thinking in the same way as you and I are. You know, like when the scariest description of a psychopath, I think, was once I heard, I think it was Nicole Kidman described it, which was she was supposed to be doing a film, I think it was called The Human Stain, where she was playing a psychopath, and she was told, well, a psychopath, this is how they would be. If you and I walked down and we saw somebody and their kid had been run over by a car, and the mum was on her knees screaming in agony, emotional agony, we would have empathy. So we would look at that and go, oh my goodness, and we would be heartbroken. We'd probably have a sleepless night. But this woman told Nicole Kidman, a psychopath would go home, look in the mirror, and start to emulate the facial expressions of the mum, because they would just find this totally emotionless. They would just be curious. Oh, so that's what a woman does when a kid's dead. Oh, that's interesting. And would just start to like act out the screaming.
Wow.
And that just creeped me out. But it also meant, you know, these guys are quite damaged, very damaged. They're different.
Right.
And I don't mean they're monsters. I just mean I can't just say everyone's the same. And that doesn't mean, I don't mean throw away justice. You put in prison, you get arrested, of course.
Right. We can't have them in society. Yeah.
Oh, crikey. Yeah. So that's not what I'm saying. But I think we're on shaky ground when we can say that group of people are not worthy of understanding or forgiveness, because you just don't know what they've been through.
Yeah, it's and kind of the flip side of that. Sometimes, like, I'll be reading tarot for someone, and I'll see someone kind of having a breakthrough. And people do this with happiness. Sometimes there's a happiness or joy that they have not felt before, and I always kind of say, now this is going to feel different. Don't panic. It's anything that's out of the ordinary we get freaked out about, and that can be a happy thing. That can be a joy you've never felt, and it's we're all. I think we all need to. Yeah, it's hard to step into somebody else's perspective. So just real quick before we get to your YouTube channel, which I'm obsessed with now, have you ever been to a place, whether it's Transylvania or anywhere, where you were really like, I can't spend a lot of time here. This energy is overwhelming.
Yeah, actually, yeah. For the Frighteners, the book, I did spend an evening in a haunted hotel, and when I was there, I think it was because I was on my own, but there was a barber shop in the cellar of this hotel, which in the 70s, a man there murdered somebody. And this barber shop and the underground of this hotel was supposedly haunted. But anyway, I that night, actually, I went out on a werewolf hunt with a historian. And so I was only staying in this hotel, because we were hunting for werewolves. And this was me dragging bits of steak up and down the waterways of a city called Hull in Britain, trying to get this werewolf, because a werewolf had been sighted in the regions. But that's another story. That's in the book as well. But anyway, but I stayed at this hotel, and I have never had such a scared experience that night. I can't explain it. It's not even like anything particularly happened, but I just was so scared. I slept with my clothes on. I remember I drew a cross. This is very embarrassing, but I drew a cross into the condensation, and then I found some kind of random sort of God channel with some televangelist on. I was like, right, I need to pack anything into this room which will take my mind off it. But I just felt very oppressed, and I think, what was scary about it was, one, it was scary, the thought of seeing something really paranormal in front of me, because I thought it's going to happen. It's imminent any moment. But also I was by myself, and I realized that if I saw something, I would have two options. Well, I have three options. I guess I'd have three: that it was just a mistake, I was seeing something that wasn't real. Two, I was actually seeing a ghost, which is scary. But then, well, maybe there's only two options. But then also I could just say, I'm going insane.
Right.
And that I find that terrifying, the thought of being insane. and so that night, I think I learned that when it comes to the paranormal, I am super up for it if I'm with other people, because other people can verify what we see. Mm-hmm. And so if me and you and a bunch of five other guys or whatever go out and we see something, that's like a shared experience. It's exciting. It's thrilling. But I'm not going to think that all of us are going insane.
Right.
But if I see something by myself consistently, and I think this is what I feel like a kind of pastoral responsibility for those people who do experience the paranormal, if they experience it by themselves, it's actually quite a strain mentally.
Yeah.
Because you just don't know, is this really happening? Am I going crazy? And also, of course, when people experience the paranormal in their houses, sometimes other people they start to be not welcome. People stop inviting them to parties. People stop coming around their house, because if your haunting becomes known, people back off from that. There's a whole sort of pastoral sadness around people who go through paranormal experiences. But anyway, sorry, I digress. That was a scary experience for me, but I'm not fully sure why I was scared. had something to do with the fear of insanity, but also the genuine feeling something spiritual was going to happen, something paranormal was going to happen.
Yeah, and I always think it's very terrifying to see something outside of our consciousness. Like if we don't, just like that's the thing about the aliens. I think they're infiltrating pictures or whatever because people, if you just see that looks terrifying. You're not even processing is that good or bad. It's like, what is that? And I always feel very bad for people that were mediums that were seeing ghosts in the house and everybody else in the house said, you're not seeing that. Like, I feel like how they survived that is very, very odd. But okay, so let's get to the YouTube channel now. And obviously everyone can get to everything from your website. Everything's there. But you do all kinds of things with your YouTube channel. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I do. I on the whole, I review horror movies and then I give a kind of spiritual perspective on it. But it's not, like, hey, this is Friday the 13th and here's a review. And by the way, you could die tomorrow. Do you know Christ? Like it's not that.
It's not a hook.
No, it's not. It's like me. I don't know. Like I'll look at a film called like Videodrome, David Cronenberg's Videodrome, and just try and work out the deep sort of philosophy and the ideas behind it. But as well as that, I'll do other sort of things. I've interviewed a few different kind of directors with that, and I get opportunities to do that actually through my magazine column, but I don't do that quite as much. I think because of the writing stuff has taken off. I'm not doing podcasting and YouTubing quite as often as I'd like, but I'd like to do that. But I love that. I just love exploring the deep things of the world, and I just that's what brings me alive. And I also I have a fear of normality. I have a fear. What I mean by that is I have a fear of life becoming banal. Mm-hmm. Like I don't want to sound judgmental here, but like sometimes I might be at a dinner party and I chat with people and they describe the things they watch or the things they do or the jokes they make, and I'm like, totally respect these people, but I'm like, wow, you're not on my wavelength. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, I don't know if you find this, Karen, but sometimes it can be actually quite lonely. I find this particularly in the sort of Christian world that, if you are into the things I'm into, sometimes you're not fully sure where you live, because I've done radio interviews in the Christian world where I found out later the radio interviewer was asking for prayer because they thought I was demon possessed, because I like horror things. And then I'll speak at a paranormal conference and sometimes people will be thinking, oh my goodness, this guy's coming in to convert us. And anyway, so it can be a lonely walk, but to me, things are just really interesting. And I find it's like what we talked about before, the epic nature, the color turning up. I've always been like that. Sometimes I wonder if one of the reasons why I'm like that now is because I'm so nostalgic for my past, and I'm kind of rewinding to my childhood or my youth to discover the things that thrilled me back then. I meet loads of people who are into horror because they started watching stuff with their grandma or their dad as kids. Yeah. And there's this nostalgia about the mystery.
You are the hermit card. I guess my life works through tarot. The hermit has been risen to the top of the mountain through wisdom, but he walks alone because everybody's not ready to take that path.
Oof. You make me cry. That's a very deep idea. But yeah, that can be that resonates, yeah.
Yeah, it's I know, and I know, like, my comedian friends, we always I'm 54 and a lot of us are 50 and 60s, and it's like no one is slowing down, and we watch some people slow down and it seems like we got to stick together because there's you're always working on that next joke or that next thing. My goodness, Peter Laws, what a pleasure talking to you, and I'm so glad your book is on Audible. I got a long drive coming up. I'm dyslexic, I don't read. Yes. I cannot wait to get it. Everybody, I know you're curious. Peter Laws, PETERLAWS, just sounds just like it sounds. .co.uk. At Twitter, you can follow him at Rev Peter Laws. Just put REV in front of it. Facebook, Peter Laws. I don't even know if I wrote a whole bunch of questions, and I don't think we got past the first one. What a pleasure, my friend. When your next book comes out, please come back on the show or send me an email. We will plug it on the show. But thank you so much. Anything else you want to tell everybody out there?
Just to keep on being spooky.
Thank you. All right, everybody. If you could leave me a review wherever you listen, I would appreciate. Thanks to Mike Flynn at Uno Rising Media. We'll see you guys out on the road. Have a great day and have a good week, everybody.